Today's guest is Jason Cutler. He's an arborist, and he was actually my old ag teacher and FFA advisor from back in high school. He just started his own company in arboriculture, so he talks with us about transitioning from working for somebody to running his own business in that. He talks about back when he was teaching, talks about the politics of school, about teachers, about parents and students, how to take care of your plants, everything under the sun. So I hope you enjoy. It's a good episode. Welcome back to Don't Take My Word For It. Today we have Jason Cutler. He's my old ag teacher and now an arborist. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me. Cody, I can't believe you're slacking, man.
He's in Ohio.
Yeah. It's probably his fault, that train derailed.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Can't take him anywhere. No, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to talking about a lot of different stuff and just being a better interview than Mitchell. That's my whole goal.
Yeah. What didn't you like about Mitchell's interview? He was our second, I think.
No, there's nothing wrong with Mitchell. I just like giving him a hard time.
I didn't realize you knew him. I didn't know. When did you leave teaching? I don't know how long that was after I graduated in 2015, and Mitchell I think is like 4 years younger than me or something.
Yeah, so I had Mitchell as a freshman, and I've referred a good amount of people to his business actually when I was still in Springfield. And he called our office. I worked at All About Trees in Springfield, which is an awesome company to begin my career as an arborist after teaching. And he called, and I did a consultation with him, which was cool because it was kind of a, meeting students on a professional or adult level, which is cool to do anytime, actually. My last year teaching was 2018, 2019, and that was at Monette.
Okay. Yeah, Mitchell, whenever I was working for Cody, whenever Cody had the landscape store here in Billings, Mitchell was in all the time. Yeah. It almost actually seems like he's never working, kind of. And he'll talk your ear off on the phone, too. Yeah. So you brought a bunch of stuff for us here today. Yeah,
I brought a variety of different things just to kind of show. And most of this stuff is newer or lightly used because I just went out on my own. We moved about an hour away from Springfield. So I've been a certified arborist actually since my second year of teaching. I started teaching high school agriculture in 2010, 2011 in Joplin, Missouri, and then the big tornado hit. I was already interested in trees and loved trees, but what happened was during the tornado, not only were people and homes and a lot of other things destroyed infrastructure, but over 50,000 trees that were destroyed. And so I was teaching at the tech center, and we taught greenhouse and landscaping. Was one of my 2-hour courses, and we got really, really involved in tree planting projects post-tornado. So I became a certified arborist and met a couple of guys, one who I worked for and one who I worked with later on. And so that's kind of how I began to be an arborist.
That's awesome. I guess I don't know. It's not something that a lot of people realize happens. People taking care of trees. And there's so many, that always fascinates me whenever you learn like a facet of society that people don't pay attention to that often. There's so many things out there that somebody out there, if you think about anything, somebody out there is an expert. Somebody is obsessed with it. I remember in high school, some of the classes, whenever you'd have, you had like the twigs out and everybody would do the tree ID off of them. I'm obsessed with trees all the time. I go hiking probably every week, and the amount of times that my girlfriend gets tired of me talking about what trees are what and like picking up pine needles off the ground and trying to figure out what tree it came from, and driving by, look at that, telling her, look at those short-leaf pines over there. I'm
nice.
Obsessed with them. Short-leaf pines and aspen trees is my favorite. We don't have the aspens here, but that's what I love about Wyoming.
Yeah. So it's there's a ton of different stuff like that. And again, my background was not, I would say, typical for a lot of people who are arborists. Some of the people that I worked with had no formal education at all in arboriculture. Mine was really, really different. I think 3 of the guys that I worked with after they went to high school went to this federal government program called Job Corps, and learned climbing and urban forestry there. And so they had formal training, almost like a tech school. And there are high schools around the country, tech centers that have arboriculture programs. But arboriculture, at its very basic thing, is caring for trees. Some arborists never climb any trees. Some climb trees all the time. Some of them are doing more diagnostics as far as, what disease or pest does this thing have, or what other problems are going on. My background was more in that, because as I was teaching, I taught a lot of different things like soils and plants, plant biology, insects and things like that. So I had a really interesting background, because after I became a certified arborist, I wasn't working in arboriculture. I was just teaching and continuing to teach high school agriculture, things like forestry, soils, again, entomology, and so on. So a lot of those things overlapped to what I ended up doing whenever I got hired at All About Trees. They needed somebody to do plant health care, and the big part of that was knowing plant ID, trees mostly, some shrubs, and being able to not only identify that plant, but then pest problems. And so if you can't identify disease or pests, then it's problematic. And no one was really at the company was wanting to do that very much there. They were all interested in climbing and pruning and so on. And so it worked out. But Noel Boyer, who's the owner there, was like, I don't have a full-time job, in this plant healthcare thing. So if you want to come drag brush and stuff like that, you can see how it works. So I did a couple days in the summer. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Kicked my butt. I grew up on a farm and was used to relatively hard work. But yeah, cowboy boots are not ideal for going on golf courses and dragging brush.
What do you got now? Is those specifically for climbing?
These are not. These are chainsaw protective boots. They are climbing related. I'll try to put them up on camera and not kick anything.
Me in the head, hopefully.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Where do you buy those?
Well, you can online. Hi-X is the brand. There's different classes of chainsaw protection. A lot of the guys that climb daily have different style of boots. These I do climb in, but they have a wider footbed. So some of the guys that climb have very climbing specific ones that are not chainsaw protective, because they're more flexible, getting out on the tips of branches and stuff. So
is that one of those things, one of those industries where most people get into it, don't think about the technical side of it like that, and they're just like, I want to climb up some trees, and it kind of seems like it would be that kind of thing where people just think that's all there is to it, climbing up and cutting trees down.
There is. So there, just like a lot of industries, it depends on what the regulations are. We live in the Midwest here. Southwest Missouri is a less regulated area than, say, California.
For all things, really.
Yeah, and other places. And so anybody can have a tree company, really. I mean, even in Springfield, there's about 5 very legitimate tree arboricultural businesses that do pruning and removals and know technical standards and how to do that stuff right, and have appropriate insurance. Not just, we're bonded, insured, licensed, whatever. That doesn't really mean anything. You have to verify somebody's insurance. I mean, just for me, I have $1 million of liability insurance, professional liability, as well as, insurance for my business and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff like that. And then workman's comp is incredibly expensive. And that is where a lot of the tree companies get sketchy. There's a lot of inappropriate things that tree companies do. Tree services, if they say they'll top their trees, that's totally inappropriate. Like that, we've known for 50 years that that's not good for trees.
Is that just cutting the top off of it and leaving it like that?
Yeah.
It kills them, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking away all of its food, and then it's stress growth. They do it a lot to sweet gums and silver maples and stuff, and it's really, really bad. So yeah, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad that can be done, but a lot of people get into it. Maybe not from the aspect of like I did. I love trees and they were super interesting. My younger brother, though, who was also involved in a lot of agricultural stuff and got his degree at Missouri State as well, in ag, he was a full-time climbing arborist for a company in Kansas City and a crew leader. And so I got to see him compete in Springfield in 2017. And like, that was like, okay, this is super cool to watch them in a climbing competition. And just like any sort of competition, you know, there's winner and losers, and time is important, but a lot of it really does mimic what climbing arborists would do on a job. And so being able to figure some of that stuff out was cool, and watch him, and he did really well. And so that was also cool. So ever since 2017, I've gone to a minimum of one climbing competition per year, not as a competitor, but at least as a judge or a volunteer or an observer. So the first year after I saw him, I went and then was a timekeeper for an event and stuff. So it's super cool. Hoping to go to maybe 3 this year. I competed in a couple last year.
You win anything?
No, I won. Not being last place. That's what I won, Matt. Again, but a big part of my job it hasn't been climbing. And so it was a big kind of stretch for me to enter my first competition, which was good for me. You know, it's sometimes hard to get out of your comfort zone. And I was like, I'm just going to do this, because if I don't now, then maybe I never will. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there any bleed between between your industry and linemen? Because it seems like they both do a lot of climbing, and that seems to be an industry that's on the rise that I hear about a lot recently. Are there anybody that you knew who were linemen, or anybody who moves from arboriculture to being a lineman?
Well,
climbing.
Some, but the climbing is a lot different. For tree removals using spikes, like I don't even have my gaffs or my spikes with me because I was doing pruning earlier today. There is some crossover, but not as much as you might think. There's all different sides of arboriculture. It's just like anything. I think the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And that was one thing I was afraid I would miss from teaching high school, is I always had such variety and I was always learning something. Well, it hasn't changed since arboriculture. I miss the students, but I still get to do a lot of teaching with the homeowners and my peers and stuff too. So
yeah, is that something that you try to do a lot of, is teaching homeowners how they can do a lot of the stuff themselves and not have to have an expert do work for them by doing preventative maintenance themselves?
Yeah, unfortunately, too many homeowners care just about the lawn, and trees and grass really aren't friends. And so Mitchell might not want to listen to this part of the episode, but he's heard this before. When I did a consultation with him, we talked about it. A lot of our urban tree problems are trees, that are in town, golf courses, universities, public places, whatever. A lot of those problems are caused solely because the trees are kind of an afterthought. Imagine putting a large tree in the area of this table.
Yeah.
Well, the soil volume that's there is totally inadequate for that tree to get mature. And then it's surrounded by a parking lot, so it's really, really hot. And then they put fertilizer on to try to get this grass to grow. Well, now you have insect problems. So a lot of the problems, my job as a plant healthcare arborist, when I was working All About Trees, I tell people all the time, a lot of my job is just bad planning, bad planting, bad landscape management. Not that landscapers don't know what they're doing for the landscape or the grass, but they are doing things that are harmful to the trees. Irrigation. I mean, some of the main problems that I dealt with, I would basically have, a big spiel to the homeowner. I'm like, we can treat this disease or insect problem with these sort of things, but you need to change the way that you water. You can't water all over the trunk of this tree. It's literally causing this fungal problem. or you have to mulch this appropriately. Don't make a giant volcano around the tree. You know,
I see that a lot.
It's terrible. You know, so there's a lot of, you know, ignorance, unfortunately. You know, there's a lot of ignorance in any industry. But some of the stuff is really basic, you know, that I tell homeowners to do. Like, yeah, you need to do this. And, you know, you can save some trees by doing some minor stuff and try to remind them, like, this is not a magic bullet. There's not a magic bullet. Tree time is not like people's time. You know, if a tree is dying immediately, well, that's few and far between. Really, there's a lot of other causes, you know.
Yeah.
There are some pests and diseases that will kill a tree pretty well immediately, but that's rare.
Tree time is not people time.
It really isn't.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, they live a lot longer. I went to Sequoia National Park in California in August, I think it was, and I didn't think about how big those trees were. I've seen big trees, I thought. Yeah. Have you ever been there?
Not to Sequoia. I got to see the redwoods just north of San Francisco, and I cannot think of Muir Woods. Oh, it's just north of San Francisco. My wife was out there for a conference, and I flew out to meet her. I only got to spend, you know, like part of a morning, but it was mind blowing. It was amazing. I thought it was
whole
super
state
cool.
Is so beautiful. I don't like I mean, me and Cody tried living there for a little bit last summer, and we came back pretty quickly. The state is beautiful, but I hate living there.
Super expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
I lived and worked in South Lake Tahoe in 2006, and
I was born in Sacramento. And then we moved here, and then me and Cody stayed in Sacramento when we were there.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's not too far from Tahoe.
Yeah, we drove through there on our way there. That was actually my first time being there. When I was a kid, we didn't go anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful area too. When we were on that long trip, I had read about Pando, that gigantic aspen tree colony in Utah that's like supposed to be the biggest living organism on Earth. And I drove right through that thing. I wanted to stop, and I drove right by Fish Lake National Forest without stopping to see where. And I was so mad at myself for not actually stopping and looking and taking in the fact of you're standing inside of the biggest thing ever that's ever lived. Those aspen trees are so pretty. I love them. Is it possible to grow an aspen tree here?
Possible to grow is different than possible of keeping alive long term. You probably could. Again, it would just take a lot of effort. Some stuff is just not well suited to our region. Again, looking at a lot of the evergreens that died or declined this last year, arborvitaes, Leland cypress, even some of the eastern white pines. We had, you know, a lot of it's just climatic stuff, you know, the wet spring. Well, then you have root suffocation, and then we had drought. And so these trees and shrubs were predisposed. They already had roots die before the main growing season. And then they had drought. So they had less ability to capture water. Mm-hmm. And then we not only had drought, an extended drought, but we had over 100 degrees for multiple days. So I even lost some stuff at my own house because I didn't give it enough water, you know, and so it's like,
So is that not a normal, it seems that people talk a lot about as time goes on with climate change that extreme weather like that will happen more and more often. You'll have worse storms or worse droughts, and is that just going to be a trend that you think keeps on going that you're going to have to deal with in that industry?
Yeah, I think it really is in forestry or arboriculture. Again, so some of the stuff that landscapers and landscape architects and all the people who end up choosing trees to plant, we overplant species because they've survived or they're pretty or it's whatever someone likes, you know. The problem with some of those species, again, just like anything, you overplant, you throw all your eggs in one basket. The more diverse you can get, the better off you are. And so trees and shrubs and other plants for that matter that are adaptable to more extreme weather, more extreme climates tend to do better. And so I have some bald cypress trees. Well, they can thrive in wet conditions. Mm-hmm. So that means their roots don't drown out and die, but they can also tend to survive some drought conditions too, more than some others. Like the white pine or whatever.
I was going to say, I've noticed if you look at distribution maps of a bald cypress, it seems like they displace a lot of other like evergreen trees, pine trees around the Boot Hill area of Missouri. I guess because they do better around the wet soils, I guess.
Yeah.
Or whenever you go into Arkansas, you see them in the swampy areas sticking out of the water. They look a lot different than whenever you see them here in Missouri.
Yeah, part of it, a lot of ours are, well, in this part of Missouri, are just planted trees, instead of a wide open,
Yeah. Do you? I hear a lot of people say that it's always better to plant trees that are native plants all around that are native to the area. Is that something that you find to be true, or is it that not the case?
I think there is good reasoning behind it, but it's not 100% the case. We can have invasive pests come in from other parts of the world. We can send pests that tend to be invasive to other parts of the world that will kill our native plants. We're looking at a lot of stuff right now. The cool thing is annually the Department of Conservation has their forest entomologist, Robbie Dorr, and then their state forest pathologist, and I don't know the new person's name, but just within the past 2 weeks, they did their update, and I was at it in Joplin, so they were kind of talking about a lot of these similar issues. And planting native is a good idea in general, but there's no catch-all because all of our ash trees are native here. You can plant them all day, but they're all gonna die because of emerald ash borer. Eventually, there's about 5 or 6 counties in southwest Missouri that it hasn't been recorded yet, from McDonald County up to probably Vernon County. I can't tell you that for sure, but a lot of those counties it's probably there. It just hasn't been detected by the Department of Conservation yet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things I won't give a straight answer on, and that's one of them. It's like there are a lot of good reasons to plant native things, but if our climatic conditions are going to get more cyclical as far as, or more erratic as far as, drought, extreme weather conditions, or, lots more rainfall, because from an overall rainfall perspective, we may be fine, but just the past week, we've had a lot more rainfall than what we did for a significant period of time in the summer. So, okay, we're fine for the year, but you can still be in a drought and have too much rain, which is weird.
Yeah. I not just with trees, but I've seen articles about it, I've read about it, about a lot of people advocating for, especially grasses, for planting native grasses and getting rid of a lot of turf lawns that people have out here. Is that something you find to be true for the health of trees? Is that, because that's what I was thinking about when you were saying that. And I've seen articles in the Missouri Conservationist talking about people who actively manage to have just native grasses, and they go out and kill anything that they find in their yard that's not native, just because it's better for animal species, better for trees, better for insects, everything. Yeah, I mean, you really think, as far as cities and urban areas and stuff like that, the Midwest, with a lot of like subdivisions and small lots and so on, everybody wanting grass to be green, it's really not an ideal situation for. It's pretty wasteful for water too. It's super wasteful. I don't see the reason. It's super wasteful for water. So for the health of trees, again, I always tell people, like, I could care less about grass. I'll let all the clover and whatever else grow there, because I don't care about the grass. I mean, I want something to grow there, but if it's crabgrass or whatever, I don't care. If it's, oxalis, or I really don't care what's growing there, as long as it's not super invasive. If it's
big leaf winter creeper. I'm going to kill it.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's a problematic vining plant, and it will grow up around trees, and they use it as a ground cover.
Just because it looks nice, or
well, he'll just like a lot of things. We had good ideas, but they don't always end up.
And they're still
good.
sticking around.
Yeah,
I've seen some people talk about one of the advantages of having grasses that are native to this area rather than a lot of these thick grasses people grow, because like small animals can't run through them very easily because they have these really thick, close to the ground, whereas a lot of native grasses spread out more or thinner, taller.
Yeah, they're and clump style grasses too. So yeah, there's a big difference between some of the grasses that we planted, and a lot of them again weren't inherently for lawn purposes, but some of them were for grazing purposes, so fescue and things like that. So a lot of times, we did things with good intentions. It doesn't always end up that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. You brought a bunch of stuff here for us. What do you got here?
Yeah, so there's plenty of stuff. Arboriculture, climbing arboriculture, with tree removals and pruning and stuff involves a lot of technical rigging and stuff. And technical rigging I am not the world's best at that by any means. Again, I was on the nerd side of arboriculture. I did climb, and I still do climb. Well, yeah, it's all fun, honestly. I love a good mix of it. But yeah, so different things. This is just a rigging ring, and it's on a sling. Basically, you're using it to control a rope is running through this, and you're tying it off to something, a limb that you're going to rig down, and it's just providing a place for that rope to go instead of go wherever it wants. And same thing with a block, and it can open up. So these are just some relatively common tools in rigging. And there's all kinds of stuff. It's real easy to spend money.
You should see all the stuff we have back here that you have to sit on the counter.
Yeah, it's really expensive, but a lot of things. So for any person that's interested in climbing, you can get paid to climb trees, and that won't be the only thing that you do, but it's cool. So there are people who that's all they wanted to do is just climb, and that's awesome. But there's a lot you need to know about the trees themselves. So when I started working at All About Trees, well, I had a ton of background in like how to make proper pruning cuts and knowing tree species and things like that. I couldn't move worth anything in a tree. I could like barely get up in it. And so I'm still learning route planning, and I've been doing it full time for almost 4 years. And so that doesn't mean I've been climbing, 4 years. There's some guys that started, 2 years ago who are just way ahead of me in climbing because they do it every day or most every day and already had a knack for some of those things. And so this is your best friend or your worst enemy. This is like a lead-filled bag. It's called a throw bag or a throw ball, and looks like a little fishing string, and kind of used like that. You throw it up into a tree over a branch union that you're trying to set your climbing line on, and so you can make your day terrible with this. It's called the Great Equalizer, and you will love or hate your day sometimes based on how this little.
Why does it get stuck up in trees or something?
Yeah, or it's not going where you want. There's a lot of manipulation to it.
I can imagine you just doing a lot of this. And
yeah, no, it's there's a lot of technique to it, and learning what works for you, and what works for you doesn't always work for someone else, and what works for you in one situation may not work in another situation depending on the type of tree, or it's like one time there was no place to throw into this tree other than off of the deck. Like I had to work off of this guy's deck in this bald cypress. So I'm having to watch out for things around me. So that's
I could put a window out. It looks like.
Oh yeah, this is a 10-ounce one, but they have them for up to 16 ounces.
Whenever I was in the Navy, they would use it wasn't this, but they called it a monkey's fist. It's like a ball of knots.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you'd use it to like a ship is coming in and you have somebody standing on the pier and somebody on the boat, and you're throwing a line across so that you can actually tie the ship off to the pier, and that's what they'd use for it. That might have been handier for it, to be honest.
Yeah, it depends. A monkey's fist is totally used in arboriculture in the right context, but if you're trying to, so my throw line I have there is probably about 180 feet, and so if you think about it, I can 90 feet is my highest point and still get it back to the ground, and so then I would tie off a rope of some sort. So like there's tons of different devices, and I'll try to be quiet here with my carabiner. But there's mechanical devices. This is one. It's called a Taslev 3. It basically it is used more in like rope access work on buildings and rescue and stuff. But in arboriculture, when you're ascending, especially, it's a quick device. So it goes on the rope, and carefully open it up. So you've got your hardware inside there, and then you're limited on rope size. Each device has manufacturer's recommendations or regulations, and it says, okay, hey, the rope goes here. This is the spot that you would actually attach it to you, not to you proper, but a climbing harness in this situation. So that's just one example. More of a newer school method.
It looks like you get your fingers caught up in that pretty easily.
You can. The thing you really actually have to be careful on that device is when you're descending. You open it up, and if you open it up too much, boy, you will go fast. And you do not want to always go that fast.
I've seen videos definitely of people falling down, to the end of a rope, and then the rope, they come right out from them, and then they had to catch themselves on rocks and trees or whatever. I can't imagine how scary that would feel.
Yeah, and so again, when I talking about regulations, so arboriculture has a lot of suggestions, but not regulations.
Really?
As far as versus some other trades, I guess you should say. So they've been in the process of working with OSHA, because a lot of times an OSHA inspector or whatever would classify something that was done in arboriculture underneath, say, forestry or something else. And it's not always appropriate, like usage of cranes or aerial lifts, like a bucket truck or a platform lift or whatever the thing is. It's just not, it's not the same. And so used to be different regulations, and everything's always changing anyway, but just trying to lack of regulation can lead to some really, really sketchy stuff. And it's why there's some really scary things out there. I've
definitely just been working for people when they want a tree gone, been doing things that I don't think wasn't very comfortable doing. We rented one of those bucket lift things and just up in there cutting a tree down and just kind of leaning over the edge of the chainsaw and trying to drop limbs not down on somebody's head.
And were there two of you in the lift?
Sometimes.
That's
not tied to it or anything like that.
So no land. So I have a lift harness and everything that I wear. And part of that's I worked for a good company, had a good safety culture, and learned a lot of stuff. But it's easy to make a mistake. I mean, and you can die.
Yeah, when you're just working for Joe Schmo, it's not as regulated.
Well, and again, it's so some places don't require a business license, some places don't have anything like that. Some of the coolest stuff I've got to do lately, I've got to do some really cool stuff. So the bulk of when I worked at All About Trees, I did generally 3 main tasks. I was on a pruning crew, pruning trees, and dealing with debris, cleaning that up, and so on. Sometimes climbing, sometimes in a bucket, not a ton. Sometimes in a lift, also not a ton. I didn't run a bucket or a lift nearly as much as a lot of the other guys. Or I was on a removal crew, removing trees. And again, it could be all from the ground. It could be climbing, using aerial lifts, whatever. Or again, a lot of my main job during the growing season was the plant healthcare stuff of identifying pests, diseases, and then helping people come up with a treatment plan and applying pesticides when appropriate or growth regulators or whatever. But a lot of times it was along with a lot of advice like, yes, this stem canker you have on your red maple, we can treat it, with this fungicide, but you have to move your irrigation. You need to get this mulch taken care of. You need to do this. And
do people actually ever need any of that advice?
Yeah, that's not as much as they could. And again,
they find out they have to dig up stuff. They're like, I don't want to.
And sometimes it's really not very difficult, and it's way less expensive than the treatment stuff that we're doing. And I always try to be really straightforward with people. Like, oh yeah, I want to. Like, say it's an ash tree. It's like, well, it already has emerald ash borer. Can it be saved? Well, that's a relative question. What else is going on with it? Did you, how many times have you hit it with the mower? You look down, like they just dug a new, deck pilings and cut half the roots on the tree. Like, no, this is not a good candidate to save. Sometimes they still want to do it. And I'm like, that's fine. You can do it. It's your money. And I've told you this is not a good idea.
Why? Just because it's probably not going to live in the long run and it's going to cost them a lot of money and damage?
Yeah. So sometimes, again, I do remove trees with my own business, but that is not my preference. So the job that I was working on today, I'm not removing them today, but there's 3 ash trees in the back. Well, they all have emerald ash borer. They've been dying. They're also really infested with several types of decay fungi, so they're going to die. We could treat them with emerald ash borer, appropriate treatments, but the tree is in such poor health that it may keep it alive like a year or two longer. That's it. And so it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It's not cheap, and again, you're also, even in the case of where you're direct injecting a tree, which is a lot of what I did for emerald ash borer in particular, you're drilling holes into a tree and hooking up a device, to directly inject this insecticide. There's still, that insecticide's going somewhere, into the tree, but, stuff doesn't disappear, it doesn't just magically go away. It has to go somewhere. So it's, versus a soil applied insecticide or, spraying a whole tree canopy and it getting drift everywhere. I mean, it's a better option. But if you don't have to do that on a tree that doesn't have any chance anyway, save the money and get it removed. Or if it's not going to cause any problems, I tell a lot of people, just enjoy the woodpecker activity that you have here. There's a lot of times that people have a low toleration for, or a low tolerance of things that don't look good. And in nature, like, all the trees and stuff aren't going to look good. When we had the ice, yeah, and there's a lot of reasons to.
They still have use when they're like,
yeah, to the environment and to you. I mean, the trees that are outside of this house here are providing enormous benefits, even if the acorns are a pain to pick up, or the leaves.
Hear all these birds out here.
Yeah, you can hear the birds, but not just that.
Walking and
mm-hmm. I mean, trees provide so many resources that. Okay, well, we're gonna replant, 2 tiny trees when we remove this one. You're not getting that back in my lifetime. Yeah. I mean, unless I live to be really old. Yeah.
If they're keeping us from having another dust bowl.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of advantages to trees, which is one reason why, again, different parts of arboriculture, some people are only in the business of consulting, meaning they don't do any work with the trees, but they're out there to give you advice, planning, tree protection on construction sites, and so on and so forth. So I've got to do some really cool stuff. Again, plant healthcare was the bulk of the work that I did, all about trees. But yeah, there's so much interesting stuff. From the consulting side, some of the coolest stuff I've done is zip lines. They have to have reports by an arborist done annually, and so you have to inspect the trees that have any hardware. So I've done a couple in Missouri and Arkansas. It's super cool. Just a thing that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but theme parks and stuff like
make sure trees aren't going to hit people on roller coasters.
yeah. Well, risk assessments are huge. So I've been a tree risk assessment qualified.
I saw in here what is this? Expert witness in litigation.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
Yeah, expert witness in litigation. Yeah, that's exciting. That means that you're doing legal work, which I've got involved in some. It's interesting, but it's usually because somebody's done something stupid, like cut down a lot of trees not on their property. So the couple cases, without sharing details of the things, public property, we're in Southwest Missouri. We have all of these lakes that have Army Corps of Engineer property around them. And so there are all kinds of regulations when your property goes adjacent to the Army Corps of Engineers. My grandparents used to have a house up on Palm de Terre Lake. So I actually had a little bit of background in knowing about some of that. Somebody called me and said, "Hey, I got this fine from the Army Corps of Engineers. Can you help me out? They appraise these trees." And I was like, well, just send me all of your information. So without, again, getting into too much detail, the property owner cut down trees that were on Army Corps properties. So the property owner was in the wrong, but the reason he ended up hiring me was not because what he did was wrong, but because of their valuation of those specific trees he thought was unfair.
So they fined him for way more than he thought when you were going to tell him. Hopefully.
Yeah.
You don't know that much money.
Yeah, well, and you don't know. And I told him, I was like, you may be paying this fine plus me. Like, you need to send me all of the details and so on. And so there was only a little bit of wiggle room. I said, you shouldn't try to fight this. There were a few trees that were not identified. And I said, this is the area where you might have some play. I said, so if you want to, I can come down, but it's going to cost you a lot of money just for me to come down there. So learning to help people and not give them false hope. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be honest, even if it's to your detriment, man. Like, sorry, like, don't think I'm just going to write up what you want me to write up.
Yeah.
Because that's not how I roll. So I always tell people that, and I'm like, you might have a case. Like, do you want to go to court? So if somebody wants to hire me for something like that, it's usually, unfortunately, a bad situation.
Yeah.
Somebody cut down something that they shouldn't have, and it's either, or I've seen this too, killed it with herbicide. Somebody had something happen to them, or they did something that they shouldn't have done.
Yeah. And
then it's hopefully most of the time going to settle out of court, but sometimes not. And so I haven't had to go to court yet.
That's where you're an expert witness. You consider yourself an expert?
Yeah, and again, according to what a lot of laws would say, then yes. And again, it depends on the situation. So if they ask me about a bunch of stuff about California native trees, I'm probably not the person, But for stuff around here, it's a fair assessment. I don't know everything about everything, but that's whenever you bring in other people.
That's kind of the sign of an actually intelligent person, I would imagine. Somebody who knows a lot about something, but admits they don't know everything, and somebody who is interested in learning more about it all the time. That's you're probably pretty smart about it then.
Yeah, it's again, I've always been interested in learning. I would go to school forever if somebody would pay for it, but again, it's
well, with the advent of the internet, there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, there really is, and some of it is some good information. So some of the arboricultural standards, like you have to pay to get a hold of the ANSI pruning standards or things like that. And there's courses out there, and some are free and some are not. But through YouTube, again, there's a lot of good arboricultural information. Not everybody out there is good, but there are some really good YouTube channels of arborists that want to teach people. Educated Climber is one. Patrick is his name. He's out of Canada. And then climbingarborist.com. He's in British Columbia, Canada. And then, I mean, there's others, but those are two just like right off the top of my head that have really good educational, informational videos. And it's like, sure that, they do stuff for content, but a lot of it's literally training,
That's kind of cool to think about people that are just out there watching videos on how to climb trees better and how to take care of trees better.
Yeah, no, it really is. Like, there's so much to it. There, in-person classes, I've always enjoyed in-person stuff, but when COVID hit and some of the stuff was available online, like I did a online, it wasn't through Zoom, but it was something similar like that. Or maybe it was Zoom, I don't know. It was a chainsaw safety course. So there's people from all over the country doing this, and the instructor is in North Carolina, and she's super good. Gonna try to bring her somewhere close to the Southwest Missouri area for our training later this year if we can get our grant approved. We'll see. Climbing Meg is her name. She's done all kinds of training stuff, but she's just some people you really click with as far as in an educational setting. I'm sure that you had that with some teachers and not as much with others. And even, I mean, I know in some of my classes when I was teaching, I was just like, I'm just not clicking as well with them. Something I'm saying is not making as much sense. So yeah, but we had people from all over the place, and we're having all these good discussions about stuff after the class is over, and really, honestly, social media, like, I was a latecomer to Instagram, but I use it to learn about arboricultural stuff. I share information too on my more nerdy technical expertise areas. I'm talking to people about, oh, hey, this pest is happening right now here in Southwest Missouri. Look for this, and people are like, oh yeah, what do you need to spray with? I'm like, you don't have to. There's a lot of options other than just
start eradicating for the advice.
Well, yeah. Is that, subscribe.
Yeah. Do you do do you bill people hourly? Are you billing by the job, or is it depending on what service they're getting?
That's a great question. So it's all variable, and in order to not be in trouble with the law about like setting prices and discussing prices, I can give vague information. But yeah, it really depends. So like on a consultation, if somebody's just like, I had a lady, for example, call me and say, hey, I want to talk about my trees. I've got some tree problems, whatever it is. I said, okay, this is your rate for me to come out there and talk to you for an hour. If it goes over an hour, it'll be, additional amount. So you can send me all your questions that you have beforehand, make a good route of where we're going to walk, what trees you want to talk about. And then we'll go from there. And she was happy to pay that rate and happy to go over the hour time because she still had more questions. And, I had to give her a lot of bad news. Like, this tree's dead. This tree is almost dead and is going to die because you cut this septic tank, drain field here, and you should not try to remove this tree yourself. Like, I mean, I can do it, but there's people I know that are way closer to you who are legitimate, you can call them. So it really depends. Some of it, service-based stuff is for like a tree growth regulator, it's kind of an expensive product. So just the cost of that plus my application equipment plus estimated time is usually what it is. Overhead in any business is a thing.
Especially once you start getting labor.
Yeah, well, I do have people who are not full-time employees or even part-time employees. I will hire basically at will, and it's people that I know and, agreed upon day rate or whatever. Yeah. And for a lot of that stuff. But sometimes it's passing stuff off to other people. Like for training and education, if I'm going to do a class for a company or utility arboriculture is a big sector of arboriculture, the people who prune trees near power lines or remove trees near power lines. And it's just a different sector because they care about keeping the power on, and
which is important, but also might not line up with the interests of the trees.
Correct. And so, but utility arboriculture has come a long way, even in the past 20 years, I feel like. So if somebody were to hire me, let's say it was a local utility company is trying to get a few of their arborists to get certified, I would basically give them a rate based on, well, how many hours of prep work, that I'm going to have to do, how many people are in class. Am I providing materials or am I just showing up with my materials and going through it? And so on. So tree planting, I will do some, but mostly that's on consulting with people. And so on. Tree risk assessment is really based on what type of report do you want. So like on the zip lines, it's all hourly based, because unless even if you have been there before, you're looking at different stuff. You don't know how long it's going to take. And report writing is a long process. And so it tends to be, like there's a fee to get to whatever the location is. There's a fee for however much time is spent there. And there's a fee for the write-up time. And, you can kind of give them a rough estimate, but you don't know, well,
and that's kind of how it is with any industry.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever happy with the bill after the work is done.
Well, you're being fair, so a lot of stuff is hourly rates, when you're learning to give estimates or bill or whatever, sometimes you miss and you eat it, or you have problems. And I did 2 big removals a couple weekends ago and bid way too low. I got to leave all the debris there. I ended up working, like I said, I haven't advertised really at all. It's people I grew up with, or know my parents will call me, and like no one in their area will do it. I'm like, it'll be a month before I'm up that area. Like, you want me to do it?
It's a good problem to have is too much work.
Yeah, it is. Again, and I don't have just a ton, but also I'm trying to figure out what to say no to, because if I have to rent equipment or hire other guys to do stuff with me, it's like the tree I was pruning this morning, it's totally fine for me to do by myself. But if I had another person there with me, we would have done it in half the time.
Yeah, but it would cost a lot more.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of business people say as a rule of thumb is when you have too much work, raise your prices. When you have too many customers or you have too much demand, make them more expensive because you can make more money for less work. It seems like part of the draw for your particular business is that your brand is kind of just doing it the right way. Everything doing it the right way. And I could see how there's a lot of value for that and why a lot of people would want to cash in on that.
Yeah, and again, so when you have the advantage of telling people, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to top your tree. I'm not going to do this thing that's totally inappropriate for your tree. It gives you leverage, if you have to say yes to everything because you got to, pay for your lease on your building or your chipper. Again, I own a lot of climbing gear and related equipment, and I think 4 chainsaws, but all that stuff is paid for. So I have lower overhead than some, but it also means that I won't do some things. Like, I'm not going to come out and clean up your brush pile. Like, don't call me for that.
That's a good luxury to have, to not have to do.
Yeah. And so there's some stuff like that, but really, I feel like I've always been pretty straightforward with people. And again, the counties that I live and work near are just now probably going to be having emerald ash borer problems. And so I have a good chance to educate a lot of people, help them if they want to treat their trees, help for them to plan for removal and or replacement of those trees, because the wood, as emerald ash borer infests a tree, it cuts off all the conductive tissue. So basically it turns to styrofoam almost.
Is that where you see right underneath the bark, you see the little channels dug in? I've seen fallen trees, out hiking that always have that. And I wonder what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of borer activity. Emerald ash borer is really particular. It's what they would call serpentine. So it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Like I've seen whole huge ash trees that all the bark has fallen off and they've failed. So they're a lot more dangerous to remove the more infested that they get.
Why? Because they could fall easy in more unpredictable ways, I guess.
Well, so just from a basic physics standpoint, they don't have the load-bearing capacity that they did. And so now you're trying to rig a heavy top out of it, and then what should hold doesn't.
It's a tree this big around.
And it's now broken, and you're putting all these forces into something that it's not able to withstand. And so normally you're like, oh yeah, I'm comfortable climbing on. For me, I'm pretty small, even with a bigger saw and a bunch of gear. I'm not going to hit 200 pounds.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
I'm like 5'11". So, but yeah, so it's hard to, some of the guys I work with who, without any gear, are 250.
That's a big old boy.
It is, and there's nothing wrong with them climbing trees, and they're great at it. I just
mean how you do it differently.
Well, yeah, and in the case of a tree that's compromised, you're like, oh,
you got an extra 250 pounds on this side of the tree. Who knows what's going to happen if it's
yeah. So that's a lot of the stuff, but I'm trying to be able to do some stuff that other people aren't doing, and
that's how you add value to your product. That's how you keep from running prices into the ground. If a lot of times when people don't have anything to value in their business, the only thing they can compete with is the price on it, and that's how you get nobody's making any money when everybody does that.
I hate that. It's the race to the bottom. It's terrible.
It's bad for everybody.
Yeah, and that's arboriculture. So I bid a small town job. There's some grant money available through the Department of Conservation for tree improvements and things like that. So a smaller town here in Southwest Missouri called me and was like, hey, we need a bid for this. So I'm like, okay, it's fine. This is all stuff I can do. I can hire some of my friends to assist on the removals, all the pruning I could have done by myself. And my bid was like 3 times more than the bid that they ended up choosing. And mine there were 1 or 2 others that were higher than mine. And I'm just like, I can't compete on price. I'm not only a certified arborist, board certified master arborist, and know all of these pruning standards, which these people don't have any of that, but they have a chip truck and a chipper. And, it sucks, because I think the tree removals, it's fine, whatever, you can't ruin a tree removal unless you cut down the wrong tree. I mean, you can tear up a lot of property, but that's
a different story.
Yeah, that's totally separate. But pruning, you can really screw up, and you can't fix it quickly. It's not a quick fix. You take too much off, you can't put it back on, and so the small town, they wanted to work with me, but they were limited on budget, which is understandable. But that doesn't mean I'm going to come down on price. And they say, if
it doesn't make it worth it for you, or if it hurt your business, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's okay.
And you're not doing charity for the trees.
no. The way that you can come down in price is do less work. Or not handle any of the debris or whatever the thing is. And that's some of the stuff that I'm able to do in the rural areas where people, can manage their own debris. They're just like, I shouldn't climb this. Like, no, you should not. That is an elm. It has died of Dutch elm disease. And the center is super sketchy. You do not need to be close to this tree at all until it's down the ground.
It's crazy to think about how much there is to know about it. Like when I was in high school, I remember I went to the Walmart in Republic, and it was Earth Day or Arbor Day or something, and they were giving out little saplings of trees. And I don't know if, that's something probably you would know about. I don't know where you should or shouldn't, or where it's irresponsible to plant them. So my parents' house in Republic, just a subdivision, regular house, it didn't have any trees on it, but I planted 3 of them.
Yeah. 2
of them are dead now, but one of them, it's like 20 feet tall oak tree now. And I don't know if that's the right place to plant it or if it's going to cause problems in the future. It's just in the middle of a yard.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. A lot of times, again, the bad planting thing, I talk about, all trees under utility lines, you don't want a huge tree under there because they're going to cut it down.
It does look better though with a tree in the yard.
Yeah, it does. And again, there's so many benefits. So trying to get right tree in the right place has been something that's been for decades. They've been trying to get people to do and look at, and thankfully we're finally trying to kill all the Bradford pears and all the other pears like that. That's my favorite tree to kill.
Really?
Yep.
What's your favorite tree to save?
It's hard. Again, because saving is a relative. You're.
Do you have a favorite tree at all?
That's hard.
I love seeing shortleaf pines around here.
Yeah,
they're not as prevalent. I've read a lot about how in decline they have been since 100 years ago in Missouri. And when you go down 60 all the way to the Boot Hill, there's that section of it around like Van Buren, an area. I love it's just like a really attractive looking tree. Isn't that what this is right here?
No, it's actually not. That's part of an oak tree. Casey Jones, who did
apparently.
No, it's a silhouette. It's all right, Matt. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I have 15 trees in my yard at home. Part of why we bought that house.
I remember you posted a video on Instagram of you walking around talking about what each tree was.
Yeah. So it was nerdy, and again, they're not in just like amazing shape. And again, the white pine is probably going to die. It just suffered really bad from the drought, but it's competing with other trees, and so that's part of it. So
it's kind of cool. I like hearing about people who have all this technical knowledge about something people don't think about. There's somebody I knew who was going to Mizzou and worked in like a soil lab at Mizzou, just talking about things that nobody thinks about. The content of all these different types of soils, how farmers and people would send it into the school to get it analyzed and stuff that nobody thinks about it,
Well, we I'm hoping more arborists will start the trend or continue on with testing. So for probably almost like the first 2-3 years that I was working all about trees, I would try to convince them that they should go ahead and test their soil or send in plant samples or whatever, because it's not super expensive to get some of these tests run, and then you can know some stuff. And some people would do it, but it took like years for me to be able to get some people to do it. And so the question you asked earlier about, do people ever take your advice? I'm usually more surprised when they do. There was this lady and her husband east of Springfield, and they were having problems with white pines. And again, eastern white pines are not native to Missouri. And again, the native thing we kind of talked about, but they can have their own set of problems. So when we had all these really, really wet springs in a row, there were some fungal diseases that were happening on these white pines. And I was like, well, here's what you need to do. You need to rake up all these needles and get rid of them. They're on the ground. They're like,
too much
what?
Moisture?
Well, not holding the moisture, as the fungal spores from those needles that were falling off were coming back down there. So that was one thing. I was like, you can hire us to do it, but you don't want to hire a whole bunch of certified arborists to rake all of this needle debris and haul it off. Like, that's going to cost you a lot of money. Like, you can do it, you and your husband, if you want to. And I mean, they're retirement age. And I said, you don't have to be in a hurry, because like, we're already in the growing season. Just do this, and then, do this in the fall every year and whatever. And then we also pruned off some lower branches that were really infected. And I said, you can do that. Whatever you can reach is fine. Like, you don't have to pay us to do that. And then we can do a treatment of fungicide and then this growth regulator to help this tree out. And it was a huge effect. Like, yes, the things that we did as a company and the things that I recommended were important, but they actually did some of the things that were just as important. So I was about 30, I guess. Oh. I looked younger, though. I don't
think you had gray in your beard last time. No. So what do you got here? What is this?
Yeah, so this is a foot ascender. Again, there are a lot of different ascent devices that help you climb up a rope.
You had those on your boots when you walked.
Yeah, so this is one that goes on your foot, like it says, and it will grab the rope. Oh, even though it's on Do Not Disturb, it's my alarm.
Oh, that's all right. And then this crazy looking saw you got here.
Yeah, so this is a handsaw. Again, I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, you're just using chainsaws. No, you use a handsaw a lot. That
seems like it would be simpler for like a small limb you're trying to get rid of instead of a chainsaw.
Yeah, and some of the ANSI standards actually say that you shall have a handsaw doing pruning operations. And so it's super nice to have. Like, the whole tree I just pruned, I didn't even take my chainsaw up on it. I had a couple limbs that were like that, but it was like 2 or 3. The rest were all smaller. I was just doing some broken and dead wood removal of this red maple tree that I was working with. So,
and how long does it take to cut through one of those big limbs like that?
Depends. So it depends on your teeth. Like this one probably either needs to be sharpened or the blade replaced. But again, depends on wood type and so on. But sometimes, you can cut through something like the size of your coffee cup in just a few seconds.
Really?
It depends on the
Is that
wood
one
type.
that really only works by dragging it? Does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it'd work very easily by going forward and backwards with it.
Yeah. Well, you are moving forward and backwards, of course, to get the action. But yeah.
That looks totally like some kind of crazy horror movie murder weapon. Big curved, gnarly.
Yeah, it would be pretty gross, and I've definitely cut myself with it. They say in the arboriculture world that Silky is the brand. It's one of the most common brands. It's made in Japan. You have to give your blood sacrifice to the Silky, and then you can use it. So,
have you ever seen any kind of crazy injuries in the industry?
Thankfully, I have not seen anything super crazy. I've definitely seen people get injured.
Yeah, anything.
But the company I worked for, again, was pretty safety conscious. So, it was mostly like, oh, something bad almost happened. There's always this stuff like you get smacked in the face with a limb. Being around a chippers are super dangerous. Chainsaws are incredibly dangerous. I'm wearing chainsaw protective pants.
You never know when it's just going to come out of nowhere.
Well, no, but really they're one of the most dangerous pieces of equipment that require no train. Anybody can go buy one.
Yeah.
I guess you have to have the money, but yeah, so chainsaws are super dangerous, especially if you don't know how to use them and you're using you're in the kickback zone or you're getting stuff that's pinched a whole lot. So I've never seen any super bad like chainsaw cuts at work.
Oh.
My dad, however, growing up, cut himself multiple times, and even though he had 2 sons that are arborists, and we gave him chainsaw chops, he still doesn't wear them. It's like,
I remember in one of your classes making us watch a video about
we watched the one
chaps.
Yeah, we did, and it was the one with the ham. Yeah,
maybe I don't remember.
Well, because we made it cut through like jeans and it was. I don't remember which video it was, but like that was like a standard one that I would show. Yeah, definitely.
I can't stand seeing people get hurt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I see a lot of videos of people like weightlifting and hurting themselves, and I can't stand watching it. When I was welding, the company I was working at, that's what sucks. No matter how safety conscious you are, there's people that make their own decisions, and you can't always. So they were always drilling into people's heads. Don't wear your gloves when you're using these rollers that you run a piece of steel through and it curves it. And don't wear gloves because it'll catch your glove. pull your hand in.
Yeah.
And there's one time where, there's signs all over the place that say, don't wear gloves when you're using this equipment. And I was welding and a guy comes up to the table and he's like holding his hand like this. Yeah. His glove is all mashed up. He's like, I messed up.
Yeah.
And he ends up, the glove is torn up, but it had pulled in and smushed his finger flat. And it was weird. It was so much pressure inside of his hand that this part busted out of his skin, even though this didn't get smashed. And I want to throw up after watching it.
Yeah, so there's really some really gross stuff that can happen. Again, wood chippers are super dangerous. Again, they're high speed, rotation, just having people know what they're doing. So, like, I'll grab my climbing line for a second. If you can imagine this going through a chipper, I mean, like, if you have somebody on the ground, like, say you're climbing, you're trying to keep this rope away from that, and so there's some videos out there that you can watch of dummies and stuff going through the chipper, but people die annually from going through a wood chipper. Oh. It's terrible. Ugh. People who know what they're doing, a lapse of judgment or whatever, that. It's just crazy, checking equipment. Again, working at All About Trees was good for safety culture because we did a lot of gear inspections and stuff like that for equipment as well as like climbing gear and stuff. Is my carabiner latching the way it should? Is it opening and closing appropriately? Is my rope damaged in a way? So doing daily inspections is part of it, but then doing in-depth inspections too. So I guess I've seen a few things, and I've got, minor injuries, but a lot of it, again, related to a chipper. So the feed wheel is pulling something in and then it's grabbing a branch and it smacks you real hard, even though you're outside of the zone, because when you're chipping, you're supposed to chip from the side of the feed tray and stuff. And so once, whenever I first was working there, one of the chippers shot a chunk of wood about like this big out and it hit me. I was, I shouldn't have been straight behind the chipper. I wasn't like this close to it, but I was, I had walked back in that danger zone to grab something else, and got dinged, and part of it hit me in the teeth. I had my glasses on, but yeah. So I've seen people, other minor injuries, but the worst ones are like stuff you see online, just people who don't know what they're doing and stuff like that. And
whenever I was in welding school, they made us get like that OSHA 10-hour certification, and it was kind of a BS training for it because my welding teacher basically just made us watch a bunch of videos of people getting electrocuted and stuff like that. I don't think that's part of the actual course, but I hated watching those too.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing in arboriculture. Electricity is a danger. So there's so many potential hazards, and again, so on things like a tie-in point to your tree, how do you know if it's going to hold the appropriate weight, or a rigging point where you're tying a rope to lower down a huge limb? How do you know what that thing is going to hold? Well, there are general standards as far as like log weight charts and things like that, but there's a lot of fuzzy math. There's a lot of fuzzy math, and there's a lot of things that you can do, wrong. People using bucket trucks or aerial lifts to hold tree parts, like it's a horrible idea. You've overloaded this thing now too, and there's cycles to failure on rope, on equipment, whatever. So it's an incredibly dangerous industry, which is why the insurance is literally the most expensive that you can get. So yeah, it's
it seems like you could monetize teaching people in the industry. My girlfriend, like I said, has a cleaning company, and she also has started recently a coaching business for people who want to start cleaning companies, and it's all online, and she makes money with it. It's kind of crazy that people would pay that. I guarantee you people would pay you just to learn how to start, run, and do it properly. arborist?
Well, there's some really cool training out there. Again, so there's a lot of the technical side, and there's some really good organizations. Climbing Meg, who I was talking about earlier, she started her own company within the past year or two called Upward Training. She does a lot of different stuff. Her background, so like if I was doing training, I wouldn't do a whole lot of climbing training other than like beginner stuff because my level is not super advanced. I can do a lot of stuff, but compared to Caleb, who I used to work with, I couldn't teach advanced rigging. I can do a lot of things, and then if I have somebody else there, get a lot of stuff done. But from the plant healthcare side, I mean, that's basically what I did as I was leaving All About Trees, was training the new guy. Like, hey, these are things you need to look for, and so yeah, there is an aspect of that too, and that's why I like the consulting, going out and helping people find an issue. And
there seems to be a trend between that and when you were teaching. You just probably just like doing that sort of thing.
I do. I do. And so that's why it was frustrating whenever, you're giving the best advice you can to a client and they're just like, no, I just want the quick fix. I'm like, okay, well, you can try to do that, but the result's not going to be good.
I can't imagine how frustrating teaching high school kids is because there's no way they want to listen to you all the time.
Yeah.
I remember some pretty unruly kids.
That's just classes. You and Cody.
I'd like to think I was a pretty docile high school kid. I don't know.
Yeah. No. So it's I loved the students. I really struggled with a lot of the organizational stuff, and whether it was having so much grading to do, and I always had a lot of different classes. I never had less than 4 different courses a year. So it wasn't the students, because again, a lot of them that were crazy just had garbage home lives, and it's like if somebody's sleeping in class, there's probably a reason they're sleeping in class. Like, oh yeah, they work till 3 a.m. because they help their parents pay the rent.
That sounds exhausting to have to learn, like, not to have to, but like that you end up finding out all those things about, 100 different people. And
or more.
I don't know how many kids you're exposed to every year, but it just sounds like you learn a lot of things that you wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, and it's a little bit sad because in some cases, even when I was a brand new teacher, I was more of a parent than some of the students ever had, and they saw me 1 or 2 classes a day and then FFA trips. And so I loved the student part of it, but I was getting really burnt out at the end. And a lot of it had to do with the politics of small town school boards and things like that. And
I guess I've never really known anything about it.
And I was without saying, negative things about specific people, people said some things that were super hurtful that weren't true, about me. Like I tried to care as best as I could for any kid, but because I wasn't showing favoritism towards certain people's kids, and they're just like, well, really? We'll basically run you out of here. And
really?
And so that, and people weren't truthful, and that was really hurtful. And so, it was weird because the most success FFA wise I ever had was at that school, and I had a good run with a lot of great students, and think a lot of them, and have since written letters of recommendation and so on for some of them. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
it seems like FFA has changed at Republic a lot since I graduated there. From what I could tell, at least.
For my opinion, it was good. I didn't really know Dave Merith whenever he came there when I was there, but he made me a better teacher and a better person. I only worked with him 1 year before I went to Spokane and started a new program, but that program at Spokane I never would have been nearly as successful if I hadn't worked with him for 1 year. And it was just weird because like personality difference. I was like really a lot different from Shoemaker, who is an awesome guy. It's just like different ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and just learning to appreciate that. One thing I feel like I've done pretty well is kind of be eclectic and be able to accept a lot of different people. Like we had the more traditional, ag kids, but it didn't matter to me if you had 47 piercings and purple hair. If you wanted to learn about plants or whatever it was, and
I remember those.
I'd be all about having you in class, and like, just because I don't know anything about anime and you like it, okay, cool, like that's whatever. I felt like, and I hope that most students felt like that too, that I really did care about them as people. But because of that, again, you have like this weight. I felt like I was never done with teaching. I was never on a break. Even if I was on a break, I was concerned, about students that were having a hard time in their life at home, and there was always something. I could never be off, mentally off work, and it made things worse at home for me. And my wife was just like, "You are not happy."
Do you think that's how it is for a lot of teachers all over the place, that they inevitably feel like they have a lot more responsibility than they should in that role?
Yeah, I think we have some issues with teaching. The people that say the teachers are in it, for whatever reason, are probably not right. There are very few teachers that I ever met that didn't care about kids a lot. Because there's a lot of BS you have to go through, and it costs a decent amount of money to be able to become a certified teacher. There were very few teachers that, I thought didn't care about students. And those were usually at the end of their career where they did like what they were doing, but they were frustrated. They hadn't adapted to some things, or they just needed to be done. And so I would say in general, teachers, especially post-COVID, who are still teaching and wanting to teach, are there for a good reason. And I would say most teachers who do any outside of class type stuff, whether it's sponsoring a club or being an FFA advisor or choir or band or anything like that, you just have the chance to know your students, a little bit more than, say, a normal classroom teacher. If you're the history teacher and you coach soccer, well, then you're going to know those soccer players and so on. So there's a lot of good people I worked with. Again, I would say 95+% of the teachers, administrators, school boards that I worked with were great people. It's the small portion, parents, same way, made it where it was not worth it for me.
I've never had
to do it.
Yeah, I've never had a position where I had to be that involved with all the people, really, where you had to clash with people that much. Really, I've never had that kind of position where you had to think about it that much. Really,
yeah. So it was weird. There were just so many factors. I just worked so much. I couldn't get stuff done as fast as some other people.
Yeah.
As far as lesson planning and writing, I'm not really fast at writing. Unsurprisingly to a lot of people, I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, which shouldn't have been surprising based on a lot of things. But so that was a big factor too, of like, I was just becoming less and less happy with all of the paperwork and other things, even though I loved, the FFA stuff and teaching students something that they could use later in life, whether it was basic welding or woodworking or, some stuff about plants or soils or whatever.
There's definitely plenty of things that I remember learning in classes with you that I still remember and I think of as really interesting things, even though they probably don't have any use in my daily life. There's a lot of things about plants or about like land surveying stuff that I never thought about before, but I still remember. just all kinds of random things.
Yeah.
I still get the Missouri Conservationist magazine delivered to my house all the time because you had those stacks of them that we would do those worksheets out of or whatever it was.
And again, I think one thing that has been cool of going out of teaching is seeing how I would get too caught up in like a certain protocol of the way to do things. There's a lot of barriers in teaching, and again, there's no quick fixes. If somebody had a quick fix, they would have already done it. But when I left teaching, my hourly pay rate went up a lot because I was working way, 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 way less.
Yeah.
Even though I made less money in a year, I was working way less. Yeah. When I was off, I was off. That's
my kind of job. I hate overtime. I hate doing things you don't have to do. I love free time.
Yeah, and again, you can. For me, my last year of teaching, we had just had our second kid, and so I needed more time. And again,
it's the most valuable resource.
Yeah, it is, and so trying to learn how to utilize that. Again, I had some really great experiences at every single school that I taught at. Taught at Joplin 3 years, Republic 3 years, Spokane 2, and then Monette 1. Good people all over the place, interesting things. I don't know. I was super proud of some things that we accomplished at Spokane with them being a brand new ag program and FFA chapter, and my best speakers in FFA events were those 2 years. Girl got second place in Creed at state, and continued to do well in speeches later on. And the forestry kids that I had did really well, and were top 10 at state, and it was just a fun, good group of kids that worked really hard and wanted to learn a bunch of nerdy stuff. So
I thought it was kind of. I remember when we would go on those competitions and stuff, and I feel like we never really took it that seriously. We just kind of were like getting out of school for a day.
Sure.
I thought it was fun though. We got to meet a lot of cool people. Learn things that nobody would ever. It's like FFA makes you learn things that school wouldn't do normally.
Well, and that's the cool thing. Again, like I still value it, and after getting out of teaching, I was still able to help with some FFA forestry competitions. I actually helped run the district competition the 1 year during COVID because Missouri State and stuff, they weren't doing any of that kind of stuff. So one of the teachers was like, "Hey, I got a big favor to ask." I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it."
That'd be interesting.
It was really cool. Again, I had a lot of good background, but really what I had was a really good team of retired teachers who I didn't hardly have to do anything. I was able to collect a lot of disease and pest samples because, like, part of my job, I was like, find them, like, oh, I'll just save this for the competition, and stuff like that. So yeah, those were some good. I had some good times at every place I was, and
Republic was your favorite, though. Obviously,
I don't know. I had a lot of good times at every school, and again, some of this at Spokane, it was a smaller school, so I had a bigger chunk of the kids.
Yeah,
and
but you said that
I started the program, so that it was a lot of where it's like, okay, like no one else can take credit for like doing this. Not that I didn't do, not that I did everything right. I totally didn't, but again, but I credit a lot of the success there to working just 1 year with David at Republic. He just made me a better teacher, and I think figure out how to push some kids to win, because I have a personality where I like to win, but I don't really like to just like, oh, you're gonna do this. So trying to figure out how to balance that of getting students to believe in themselves. Say, hey, yeah, like you can do this really well. And so whatever the FFA knowledge team, my first year at Spokane, won district. So I was like, this is awesome, and a lot of people.
I definitely never won anything. And
That's right. Again,
I got some like second place ribbons on a welding table or something.
Yeah.
At the fair, I think that's about it.
Yeah, it's not all about winning. I do like to win, but again, a lot of the learning,
Yeah, that's my favorite. I love learning stuff. You should see. I know Wikipedia is not the go-to source for information, but my Wikipedia app on my phone has hundreds of tabs of just things. A lot of them, honestly, are about trees. I like learning about what trees are related to each other taxonomically. It's pretty fun.
Taxonomy is crazy because it's always changing too.
Yeah.
So
it's like an area of science that people are always arguing about.
Yeah, they are. Just so you know, the dogwoods have been split up in all corners.
There's this. I don't know if you're ever on TikTok. I recently had to delete it because it's way too addicting. But there's a TikTok account that I followed. The guy's like a woodworker, but he's also really into trees. And he made this map thing where he would, every state's tree, he would cut out.
I have seen his stuff.
And his very last one he did was Missouri's, but he didn't do the dogwood because he said he did a black walnut. He thought and he argued very well. He did put up a good argument why he thought that should be Missouri's state tree instead. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of cool stuff, and I cannot think of his name, but actually I got that map, not with the wood, but the picture of the U.S. map, like for my birthday or Christmas. My parents were asking, like,
with all the wood.
Yeah.
It's some exotic woods on there.
He's got Hawaii, he's got some really cool stuff that he does.
Yeah, so. I like that guy. I wish I remembered his name.
I'll find it.
Yeah. So, is this an industry that is there growth in arboriculture, or is it? Do you see a lot of opportunity? Since I guess you must, since you just started a business.
Yeah, or else I'm just totally crazy. No, there's huge opportunity in arboriculture. I think, like a lot of industries, it's dominated by really large companies, which we don't have any of the enormous, like, national companies here in Southwest Missouri, other than in the utility arboriculture industry, which is pretty normal. But again, the more overhead you have, again, wages tend to get suppressed. And so people can start their own business, but honestly, I never would have started my own business without working at a good company. First, I'm learning a lot of stuff.
How it could be done properly.
Well, yeah, and it's too easy to die. And get seriously hurt with some of the stuff that is done in pruning and removal operations. I mean, not so much in consulting, expert witness stuff. I guess somebody can try to shoot you, but
it's crazy how much you can prevent by just making sure you do things the right way every time. Whenever I was in the Navy, that's kind of how they make sure things go well. Is no matter how mundane of a task you're doing, there's a procedure and you follow it step by step. No matter if you're greasing a hinge, there's a procedure for everything, and as long as you follow it, nothing will go wrong.
Well, not totally, but yeah, it prevents. I can't remember who says it, but there's an arborist that says, like, basically deal with your maintenance, or your maintenance will catch up to you. Type of thing, because like, oh yeah, well, should have sharpened this chain, or should have been greasing these hydraulic. The fittings on this hydraulic machine, whether it's a skid steer or whatever, but, and then I didn't, and now it's, taking a dump. Yeah.
I wonder how hard it is to get into that habit of, I guess it sounds like you're going to try to keep those good habits from the get-go, whereas an industry that does it, try to, some company who realizes 10 years down the road, they're like, we're doing a lot of things wrong, and we're going to save a lot of money and time by doing things the right way. I wonder how much harder it is to correct them.
Correcting mistakes is always harder, no matter what it is, whether it's whether it's dribbling a basketball or whatever. And so for me, like relearning some rope work skills was like, so hard, because I didn't start out doing them very well. So yeah, and I think, again, you go back to the thing, there's the race to the bottom in so much of it's a service industry, and like, oh, well, they can trim my trees for this. Well, it's not the same thing. I'm not going to do the same thing as anybody honestly in the market that I'm in near Carthage, Joplin. I mean, there's hardly any certified arborists in that area, period. But I'm not going to do some of the same things. Like to remove your tree, okay, hire whatever, that's fine. But there's nobody there who's going to do a lot of the things that I am doing, and
that
so
gives you a lot of room to make money.
Yeah,
because you can provide a service that nobody else is going to.
Sure. Again, but some people are only on price, and those are not the people that I'm trying to work for, and that's okay.
That's one of the hard parts about business is that's market, that's sales, really. Just trying to convince people that your service is the one they actually want or need. And a lot of times that is the only thing people care about is money sometimes.
And it matters, So if I can have my chimney cleaned for $300 or whatever it is.
What does it cost to get it? I don't know. I've never. I live in an apartment.
I think it was something like that. I can't remember for sure. It might have been a dryer vent cleaning and an inspection and the chimney. But let's say it's that. Well, why do I care if this person does it or this person does it? Like credentials and stuff matter to some degree. But again, a lot of the public just doesn't know enough about arboriculture. They're seeing people like, oh, they trim my neighbor's trees on $200, and they're topping stuff.
That's the purpose of getting all these certifications and stuff, is because you're taking that knowledge load off of the customer, and all they can do is trust a governing body to make sure that you're doing everything properly.
And the governing body doesn't have teeth like some do, but if somebody was like, oh, I saw, they saw me topping trees. Well, all they would have to do is basically submit something to ISA, and then I would not be credentialed.
Well, is it a fight for you that a lot of small town stuff is just the neighbor comes over and cuts off part of your tree? How do you get around people saying things like that? Customers, whenever you quote them, how do you get around that?
Well, again, a lot of times it's just not even going to do an estimate in some cases. Like you have to understand, like, I'm not going to be the lowest price. Having that conversation, or I'm going to do a consultation. Like I might do work for you too, but you might not need work done. I'm not going to go charge them. I'm not going to go there just to sell you work, because again, the problem with that mindset. And again, I had a lot of cool flexibility at All About Trees, this is not normal for a lot of arboriculture companies. Even though I was the plant healthcare manager, I didn't have sales quotas or whatever to meet. It was, the most important thing is that you do what's right for our customers. And I don't want you to sell unnecessary stuff. And because of that, I sold a ton of stuff. Because I was really straightforward with people, and I'm like, all right, you can do this, 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 and this. Well, what would you do if it was yours? I was like, well, I would do it myself, and it wouldn't cost me this money.
And
but
so that's because you know all this.
And it was like, I would have never had volcano mulch.
That's a valuable
all over my tree.
That it must feel good to work for a company who does something like that, who makes it so that you're doing things.
Right. I never felt like, oh, I've got to do this. And, sometimes you're just like, this is not the best option. A customer wants it anyway. And sometimes you have to walk away. You have to say no. And sometimes it's trying to convince them to do something else. Like, this is what you want,
but it's not the right option.
Or we can do this and it's still an option that's okay, but you need to understand like what the potential consequences are of this particular action, But it's hard because again, there's Springfield Metro probably has 50 plus tree services, some of them are just the ones that just spray painted signs, and literally
landscaping. I know it's not the same thing as landscaping, but I know it's a super saturated market. And if you're saying most people are just cutting trees and that's it.
And again, some people, they'll just do literally whatever the customer wants.
You ever think about doing like a business to business type thing of you could be consulting for some of these other and just propping up their business also?
Yeah, and again, that just depends. I'm willing to work with and for other people. I have a friend in Oklahoma who's like, "Hey, dude, like, can you come down, for a little bit?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but I can't be gone like super long. I can come down for a day or so." Yeah. But yeah, some of that's just trying to figure out what all I want to do. Because like, will I do tree planting? Yes. Is that going to be the main thing I do? No. Mostly, it's going to be helping you find the tree to plant. I'm not going to have equipment to bring it all out there and so on. So
yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk forever, but
yeah, we
keep on going.
we definitely could.
Yeah.
Eventually, I should go home.
Yeah,
but
right. Do you have? I know you said that you don't have that much help yet, so you can't take that much business.
Yeah.
But what people who are interested in your services, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So
I can put all your stuff up.
Yeah, you totally can. Yeah, Arbor Cutler is the name of the business, and there is just one website page because we're working on the rest of it. I have a lot of writing to do, which I'm not super motivated to do.
That's what AI is for. I'm telling you, it's so good at. You get on there and you tell it a few things. You're like, I'm trying to write an ad copy for such and such, or I'm trying to write a landing page from a website. This is our values. This is all the stuff, and it'll spit a thing out just like that. It takes away a lot of work like that.
Anyway, that's one way. And again, I work not just in Missouri, but it just kind of depends. Like for consulting and stuff, I'm not going to go to Alaska to prune somebody's tree. It'd be super expensive.
Fun tax write-off, though.
Yes.
I want to go to Alaska.
Yes, it does. Alaska's great. I've lived there 2 summers.
I remember you saying something about you and some friends or something swimming in Alaska when it was frozen or something.
Well, we swam in a glacial lake.
I'm obsessed with national parks. Dude, and hiking in the mountains and stuff, and I'd love.
There's a bunch up there. The Tongass National Forest is beautiful.
Really, the most beautiful place I've ever been, Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Have you been there?
Yeah, I have twice. Maybe
really?
3 times.
If I could afford it, I would live in Jackson. I would. That place is. Me and Cody went on this 20-mile hike up into the mountains there and saw bears and moose, and it's the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen. I can't imagine a better place to hang out.
Yeah, there's Wyoming is very unpopulated too.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of different terrain. There's the Tetons over on the west, and then you get we went to Devil's Tower, and that area is way different.
It is.
There's a lot
Devil's
of stuff.
Tower's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. You ever hear people? There's like a viral post I've seen online where people try to say Devil's Tower was an old tree. Yeah,
those people are on crack.
Yeah,
on the record.
Yeah. Well, I guess. I'm going to put all your information up on the screen.
Yeah, you totally can.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. And
no, thanks. I'm glad it worked out today.
Yeah. I could keep talking about, I like hearing about trees, and I annoy people most of the time with trying to figure out stuff.
Well, you pay me that right amount of money, I'll talk to you about trees all day, man.
Well, it's mostly when I'm hiking and I'm looking at a tree and I'm like, I wonder what kind of tree that is or something. And there's tons of, in my phone, pictures of pine cones or leaves or stuff or twigs, and then I'm going to go back later, try to figure out what it is. And that's way harder, I've noticed. I don't know how am I supposed to take something like a twig or a leaf and be like, what kind of tree did this come from?
Well, location is part of it too.
Yeah.
So if you have location on your phone where it's like, I was in, southeast Nebraska or wherever you were.
Yeah. So. Well, I've heard, as far as I could tell, that shortleaf pine is the only native pine tree to here. But I saw a few weeks ago on a trail in Branson, the whole trail had these pine trees that didn't look like it. They had like 5 needles in a bundle, and they were a lot softer needles. I don't know what kind of pine tree that would be. Is that hard to tell off of that description?
Eastern white pine is one that could be, and they're planted in Missouri a lot. Yeah. So
they were all like along Lake Taneycomo on Table Rock, or not Table Rock. I actually think it is part of Table Rock State Park. There's a bunch of trails right there, but
they could have been planted. Yeah, very possible.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like that, we've got a lot more content on Patreon. It's patreon.com/DTMWFI. We got behind the scenes content. We got early access stuff. We've got videos that are exclusive to Patreon that we won't post on YouTube. We got tons of stuff like that.
Yeah, and we've also got pages on TikTok and Instagram. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yeah. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.